Hello, everyone. Welcome to this afternoon's free community webinar, Empowering Youth in Mental Health, in conversation with the team from Kookaburra Kids. My name is Tracy Duncan, and on behalf of the team at Fearless, thank you so much for joining us. While everyone is logging in and getting settled, and before I hand over to our host and board director, Belinda Neal, just some general housekeeping and announcements. As always in our webinars, we welcome any questions you may have. Please comment in the Q&A section, and we hope to have some time at the end of the session to answer those. We will also be recording this webinar, and a link will be sent to all registered attendees in the coming days. So if you're unable to attend this event live or need to duck off early, you're still able to view the recording at your own convenience. Fearless is a charity run by volunteers. We're always grateful to receive donations, no matter how small, to continue the work we do. Our vision is to restore control to people living with post-traumatic stress. Donations can be made via our website, www.fearless.org.au. You can also stay connected with Fearless socially on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. We provide updates on any upcoming webinars and events on these pages, so please be sure to follow us. Okay, I think we're now ready to get started. So good afternoon, Belinda. I'll hand over to you.
Thanks so much for that, Tracy. My name is Belinda Neal. I'm a former New South Wales police officer who was medically retired with post-traumatic stress disorder. After many years of recovery, I'm now a board member of Fearless PTSD Australia New Zealand and an ambassador for Australian Kookaburra Kids Foundation. In the spirit of reconciliation, Fearless acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to the elders, both past and present, and extend that respect to other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people today. Welcome everybody to today's webinar. A couple of brief messages before we begin. Please note, we at Fearless are not mental health experts. We are here to invite discussion and provide information about post-traumatic stress disorder and mental health. If something triggers you today, please consult your general practitioner or mental health professional. And secondly, following on from what Tracy said, we at Fearless are always grateful for any donations, no matter how small, to continue the work that we do. If you wish to make a donation, please head to www.fearless.org.au and select the donation button. Now, I am passionate about educating and empowering those with PTSD or other mental health ailments, and of course, the loved ones of those that are affected. When I first became aware of Australian Kookaburra Kids Foundation, I was particularly excited as this was the first organisation and only organisation I was aware of that provided evidence-based, age-appropriate programs to young people aged 8 to 18 in families affected by mental illness. Now, giving these young people tools to empower them and help build their resilience, such powerful tools and a wonderful organisation of which I'm an ambassador for. So I've asked them to come today and present to you so you might become aware of what they do and hear strategies on how to talk to your children about mental health. I only wish that when my children were going through the stages when I was trying to deal with my post-traumatic stress disorder, that I was aware of Kookaburra Kids. You will also have an opportunity to ask our panel any questions later in the webinar, so please note your question in the appropriate chat box. So today, we have the Australian Kookaburra Kids Foundation CEO, Renee Coffey, one of the directors, Lee Knight, and also psychologist Crosbi Knight, who wrote the chat groups used in the programs. Without further ado, I would like to introduce you to the CEO of Australian Kookaburra Kids Foundation, Renee Coffey. Now, prior to this role, Renee was the Deputy CEO at the Australian Indigenous Education Foundation, Australia's largest scholarship program, and before this, she headed up Reconciliation South Australia. Renee is an experienced not-profit leader with more than 15 years experience leading complex non-profits and an additional 7 years grounding in the public service. When asked what drew Renee to Kookaburra Kids, she explained, "I am passionate about empowering young people with the skills and knowledge needed to build the lives they want. and I've spent most of my career working hard to offer those opportunities. Renee explained that by providing evidence-based, age-appropriate prevention and early intervention mental health services embedded within a peer-based, social and activity-based format, Kookaburra Kids affords young people the best chances of reaching their full potential. We look forward to hearing from Renee about what Kookaburra Kids is all about. Thanks so much, Renee.
Thank you, Belinda. Thank you so much for having us today, and the team at Fearless, and also to the participants who are joining. It's wonderful to be here. I do want to acknowledge the lands as well that we're all coming from. For me, I am coming from the lands of the Turrbal, Yagara and Jagera people here in sunny Brisbane, and it's a beautiful day up here. As Belinda explained, I work with the Australian Kookaburra Kids Foundation, and we work with young people aged 8 to 18 years who are impacted by family mental illness. In terms of our history, we were created more than 20 years ago in the Shire in Sydney by a magnificent woman named Diane Madden, who was our founder. Diane set us up because she herself was a child in a family impacted by mental illness, and she was acutely aware of the need that children in those circumstances have, and the fact that there wasn't a lot in the community that was available to address those needs. So Diane established what was then Camp Kookaburra, and it was a small, completely volunteer-run organisation that hosted amazing camps for children. And we've grown since that time. Over the last 20 years, we've become a national organisation, and just this year we have expanded into Tasmania, which was our last state or territory to move into. So we now operate in every state and territory across the country. And we have three different but similar programs that we run. The first at the moment is called the CORE program, and that's for all young people who are impacted by family mental illness. We've also run a first responders program to address the specific needs of children who are from the families of first responders, and also a program for Defence Kids, so children from current and ex-serving members of the Australian Defence Forces. And that program is our largest at the moment and funded through the Department of Veteran Affairs, and that occurs across Australia. So in terms of the activities that we run, we hold still camps, absolutely, from our very beginning. We hold a lot of camps for children as well as activity days. And since COVID, we also run online Connect sessions where children from all parts of Australia are able to come online and participate in our programs. What all of our programs contain, and what is similar about all our programs, are that they have a mental health literacy and education component, which you're going to hear more about today. But that's really the differentiator between us and other organisations. We work with these children from families. We provide them with some amazing experience, but really that mental health literacy and education is critical to what we do and central to everything that we do. In that work with young people, we look to bust myths and address mental health myths with young people. We want to build their understanding of mental health and how they themselves are able to maintain good mental health. We know that young people who are in families impacted by mental illness do have an increased rate of experiencing mental illness later in lives themselves. The research does tell us that. We're also looking to encourage help-seeking behaviours for those young people, and that's done through the work that we do with them. And in particular through our chat groups. And we're really honoured today to have Crosbi with us, and you'll hear more from Crosbi shortly. She created the chat groups for us. So when we talk about camps and activity days, the activity days include fantastic activities, everything that you can imagine. I get a list every week of what's happened, and I am envious of the fun that is had by our team and our volunteers, and of course our young people. They get to go roller skating, kayaking, bowling, martial arts, bridge climbs, trips to the zoo. Really great, fun, engaging activities, which is wonderful for these kids because it's a bit of time away from home and some real fun with peers who have similar lived experiences to them. But more than that, more than the fun and more than the peers, is that mental health literacy. And that's happening in a place that isn't school, it isn't home, it's with peers who have a similar lived experience. And that really, I think, is part of the magic of what happens at Kookaburra Kids. It's these kids connecting together, learning together in a really safe, fun, supportive environment with our team members and with our wonderful volunteers as well. As Belinda said, I'm new to Kookaburra Kids. I have started in April this year. It's a cause I'm incredibly passionate about. For me, moving on from Indigenous affairs was a really big decision, and it wasn't one I took on lightly. And as soon as I learned about what we do at Kookaburra Kids, I knew this was the organisation for me. It's phenomenal work that we do every single day. So I'm incredibly thankful to Belinda as one of our very valued ambassadors, and to Fearless for hosting us today. And I'm really looking forward to hearing from Lee and Crosbi as well. So thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that, Renee. What Renee is talking about in terms of the different activity days and camps that the kids go on, one of the most important aspects of these activities and camps is the chat groups. So we're going to now listen to Crosbi Knight, now who's going to talk further about these chat groups. Now, Crosbi holds a Bachelor of Psychology, a Master of Forensic Mental Health, and a Master of Clinical Psychology. Crosbi has worked in the challenging area of child protection for FACS, and she has worked in a specialist interagency team with New South Wales Police investigating crimes against children. She spent 4 years running the largest juvenile jail in New South Wales as the first and only woman to ever have run that prison in its 107 years of operation. Well done, Crosbi. Crosbi first became involved in Kookaburra Kids in 2007, making her one of the longest standing volunteers and an integral part of the Kookaburra journey. Crosbi is deeply passionate about the Kookaburra Kids mission, having grown up as an only child of a single parent mother who experienced significant and multiple mental illnesses and died by suicide when Crosbi was 24 years old. Crosbi developed the psychoeducational and skill building component of the Kookaburra Kids program called Chat Group, which is a central part to the activities run by Kookaburra Kids. Crosbi also wrote and delivered their Volunteer Leaders Development Program and wrote the leaders' manuals to guide volunteers through the Kookaburra Kids program. In her current role, Crosbi is a Director of Correctional Practice in Corrective Services, overseeing rehabilitative services for adult offenders across the state. Through this work, Crosbi focuses on people getting the help they need to live non-offending lives and creating safer communities for all of us. And just a quick one, outside of their day jobs, Crosbi and Lee own and run a private practice, Decipher Mental Health Services, where they deliver individual psychiatric assessment and intervention for people experiencing any mental illness or offending issues. Crosbi, I'm handing it over to you now to talk to us about the chat groups, how they were developed and how they work. Thanks so much.
Thanks very much, Belinda, and thank you for that thorough introduction. And hello to everyone. I'm really grateful to be invited to speak to you today, and I will talk about the development of the chat group, which Renee has kind of touched on where that came from. So yes, I did join the Kookaburra Kids back in 2007, and that was when it was still being run by Diane Madden, and it was still a very small local Shire-based group. And I joined as a volunteer leader on the camps, and very quickly picked up that there wasn't anything that was specifically addressing the reason why everyone had come together. So everyone had come together because they were impacted by family mental illness, but that wasn't actually ever explicitly discussed. And I guess there wasn't anything that really made the camp different, because they were only camps at the time, made the camp different to what could be a respite opportunity, or there are recreational camps that you do. And so I really saw that this was an opportunity to not just be a break, but also to actually be a support system, and also to provide really needed skills for these kids that we were working with at Kookaburra Kids. So I kind of volunteered myself to become what was the first ever camp counsellor, which has grown and developed over the years into a clinical role that we have across the head office groups, but also that go and see the kids during the activities and during our Connect sessions and during our camps. So in that role that I took on, I did some research around, okay, what is it that children in this circumstance need? So kids that are living with a parent or a close relative with mental illness, what's important for them? And what we found is that there weren't other programs that existed like this. So there wasn't something that was off the shelf that we could take and replicate. This actually was something really fresh and new for this area. So I had to design something that was based on the evidence out there, but was a new thing in and of itself. So what I identified through the evidence is that children, and when I say children, I mean up to 18, largely need 4 things. So they need 1, age-appropriate information about mental illness and about what's occurring in their family home. They need, number 2, to know that they are not alone in this, to feel like they are part of something and to understand that other people have these experiences too. Number 3 is they need to develop coping skills so that they can deal with some of the more difficult things that happen in their lives. And number 4 is they need to be connected into supports. So I built the chat group around those 4 goals. I also agreed very much with the literature that was out there that as a Kookaburra kid myself, having grown up with a parent with mental illness, that those were the things I would have benefited from, because I certainly thought that I was the only kid going through this and I didn't understand really why my mum wouldn't get out of bed some days. And when children lack that age-appropriate information, they fill the gaps, most often thinking that they are the problem, which I certainly did. I thought it must be me, why mum can't get out of bed and do mum things. So that's why that's so important. And I didn't know who to reach out and talk to. So not only can I recognise personally how important these goals are, but also it's based in the evidence about what helps them. So the chat group is written in a breakdown of age ranges so that it's developmentally appropriate depending on the age, and it also responds to issues that emerge as children grow. So there are younger groups, there's 4 different age components, so the really young groups right up into your teens. There's also a complementary manual that goes with it that's for our leaders, so that the people that come along and support us in the work that we do have an understanding about what the intention of chat group is, how to deliver it and how to engage. Because as I'm sure you know, children don't necessarily come away or engage with services like ours for a lecture type environment. So you have to deliver things in a really dynamic, engaging way that actually doesn't feel like learning and feels really helpful. So there's a whole range of different suggestions and strategies around, perhaps you could do this in a way like a football game, or perhaps you could do this in this crafty way. So it really makes it engaging for the right developmental ages. So the first component of chat group focuses on mental illness education. So sometimes the children that engage with Kookaburra Kids, they may know what is happening in their family, or they may not. And that's okay. We never pressure children to talk about what is going on for them or to disclose. We just provide that education, and things might resonate with them or it might not. Some children are aware of a particular diagnosis, but they don't necessarily know what that means, or they see what's happening in their house but don't know why. So for instance, you know, dad's a lot more angry than usual, or, you know, he doesn't do the things that he used to do, or mum, you know, sometimes cries a lot and I don't know why. So the mental illness education is about helping the children to actually understand this is what mental illness is. Broadly, this is how much it occurs generally in the community. And let's talk about different types of diagnoses. So what is depression? What is anxiety? What is schizophrenia? What is post-traumatic stress disorder? We talk about all these different things so that children start to go, oh, okay, I actually understand why that's occurring in my house now. Or I understand that, yes, that matches with what I've been told. Moving on to the second goal is about that opportunity for them to realise they're not alone, is we provide a safe opportunity for children to share with each other about their experiences. Again, completely voluntary. People don't have to share if they don't want to, but those that do want to share, figure out that, oh, wow, I'm not the only one who's had these experiences. Because often when children come and engage with Kookaburra Kids, it's the first time they've met other children who have had similar experiences in their family, and sometimes people feel like they can't talk about mental illness and mental health, in their normal community environments, whereas this is a place where it's safe, it's open, and everyone is there for the same reasons. When we move on to goal 3, we talk about building those coping and resilience skills. So it's really practical, thinking about what can they do. So the leaders will teach different activities, and there's always a whole range, because not every kind of approach will work for every kid. So it's a whole range of different, so it might be some mindfulness strategies, relaxation strategies, how to, not worry so much about what's going on in their home, or how to ask age-appropriate questions about what's going on, how to help focus on their schoolwork if that's something that's difficult for them. So it's a range of different strategies based on what's happening for them at home that we know helps them cope. And we've had lots of feedback from kids before saying things like they keep the chat group book, because they get to take a chat group book home, and they can write little notes in it and strategies that will help them. We've had feedback about kids keeping it under their bed so that they know it's there and they can pull it out and look at it when they need to. Then the fourth goal is about connecting into services, because whilst Kookaburra Kids has grown and provides significantly more support than we ever did before, we also can't be there all the time, and it's important that kids have a range of options available to them. So it's about letting them know what the different services are that are available that might help them, how they can access them, and things that suit different kids. So even if it's about, using different websites like Kids Helpline online, and they can do chat with people in real time, knowing what the supports are that are there for them, so they go home feeling like they're actually more prepared to deal with the ups and the downs of their life. So that's the broad goals and the way that the chat group works. And we also do a lot of work on supporting the leaders and the clinicians who provide that material, so that they understand how to do it in an appropriate way, in a way that supports the children to feel safe, and also makes sure that they feel that there's no judgment around whatever's happening for them in their home. There's no judgment there. This is about us trying to help children to have a better life at home and a better relationship with their family, because they will have a better understanding about what's happening for them. So we do a lot of work on, I guess, both of those levels, one with the children and two with the leaders and with the clinicians. So that's, I guess, a broad overview of what's happened for chat group.
Thank you so much for that, Crosby. One of the things that you mentioned there, and I think it is so powerful, is that you're giving young people skills like mindfulness and relaxation exercises. They're learning that young. It took me years to learn, and I've already fallen off the perch with post-traumatic stress. So imagine if I had already known about these details and how to look after myself at a young age, perhaps I would never have been in the position that I was. So this is one of the things at the heart of Kookaburra Kids I absolutely love, and what's provided in those chat groups. Just a quick question before we move on to Lee. Crosbi, you have the lived experience with your background. So I just wanted you to expand, if possible, on, you sort of touched on the fact that these kids could be coming and they feel to blame. What else could these kids be feeling from your own lived experience?
So look, there's a range of experiences, and I guess that's the important thing that I'm sure the people joining us today know, is there is no one way that people experience mental health issues, and there's no one way that people experience PTSD, for instance. And so that's very similar for these children, is there's no one way that they will experience it. But the broad range of experiences that I've seen is, some children present as what we would call parentified. So they've taken on responsibilities that are beyond their developmental age. So they may have to cook and clean for themselves because their parent isn't able to. They may have to do that for other siblings. And so they may present as being much more mature for their age. than people would expect of them, because that's the role that they've had to play. Or on the opposite spectrum, it may be that they're actually, they're used to only having to, access food that is ready-made, let's say pre-packaged things, and they've not actually had experiences that we would expect, such as, how to use cutlery for a meal, and what are these different foods that are being presented to me, like steak, that I'm not familiar with. So we've seen that real spectrum of experiences. We have some children who come to Kookaburra Kids, and actually it's very anxiety provoking for them to leave their parent or their family member that has mental health issues, because they feel like they need to be there all the time, even if it's not necessarily actively caring. It's that watching and making sure, are they okay? I'm watching for signs that things might not be all right. Whereas for other children, actually mental health may not be discussed in their home. And they may know that there's something, but they may not actually really know what it is. So we have to be prepared at Kookaburra Kids for all the different experiences that children may have had in relation to being affected by family mental health, and be able to assure them that whatever those experiences are, that's okay, and that their experiences are totally normal. The biggest thing that we want to do is make sure they understand it is not their fault, because, as we know, it's developmentally normal for children to be completely self-centered and self-absorbed and think the world revolves around them. And that also extends to them thinking, well, if there's something wrong, then clearly it's my fault. Clearly it's me. It's all about me. And so it's about ensuring that they know it is not their fault. And what are some of the reasonable things that they could do to better understand what's happening in their home? So that's something that's been really important in our processes.
That's wonderful. Thanks so much for that, Crosbi. And we may well come back to you with some more questions too. So don't forget, everybody, pop your questions down in the chat box. And now we're going to go to Lee.
Belinda, before you do, can I just say also, I'm very happy to answer any questions about my own lived experience. So please, people, feel free to ask questions. You don't need to be polite about any of that. Happy to go there.
Thank you so much for that, Crosbi. That's wonderful. So Lee is a clinical nurse consultant, forensic mental health, has a Master of Nursing in Clinical Practice, majoring in mental health, a Master of Forensic Mental Health. He joined the board of Kookaburra Kids as a director in 2014. Lee also chairs the organisation's Clinical Governance Committee, where he provides clinical oversight to the organisation, ensuring that the organisation's service continues to be delivered in line with the clinical underpinning of the programs. Now, Lee has worked in mental health for over 23 years and has been a Kookaburra Kids camp volunteer leader since 2011, assuming the role of camp nurse and counsellor. Lee is currently working as a clinical coordinator of a large randomised control trial at the School of Population Health, Faculty of Medicine, New South Wales Uni. Lee is also a lecturer in forensic mental health on the Master of Forensic Mental Health program at New South Wales University. And he has a private practice writing comprehensive psychiatric reports for the court and judicial system, and providing treatments to clients with a large variety of complex mental health needs. Lee is also a consultant at the Black Dog Institute. Today, Lee is going to discuss research in this area, as well as give you some strategies on how to speak to your children or young people about your mental health and how to seek help. Thank you, Lee.
Thank you, Belinda, and thank you everyone for tuning in today. Yes, I think the first thing to speak about is the research. And like Crosbi said, there was no off-the-shelf offering that we could bring into Kookaburra Kids, and that was before my time, when Crosbi initially designed Chat Group and was involved in that process. But I was certainly around when Crosbi did the huge reevaluation of Chat Group and gave herself over to looking at all the research. So the advice that I'm going to, or the kind of information that I'm going to give people about how to speak to children is very aligned with our Chat Group process. It's just kind of moving that to the home rather than it being in kind of the Kookaburra Kids way. But in regards to research, my understanding is there's not a huge amount of research about the efficacy of programs like Kookaburra Kids. So the international literature suggests that what we're doing is right and we're on the right track, and those 4 pillars that Crosbi spoke about before are absolutely spot on. We very much behind those. But what we want to actually do is, in kind of real life, see if they work in practice. And that's what Kookaburra Kids has started doing. And I will start that it is in its infancy. So we don't seek to do a huge randomized control trial off the bat. That's not possible. So we're starting off doing kind of small research. So to set it up, Kookaburra Kids engages an independent researcher who's responsible for our data analysis, and our goal is to have our findings published in peer-reviewed journals. So we're reviewed by our peers, so we know that what we're saying is accurate and that it's tested and it's statistically valid. So what we've been doing for several years now is collecting data on Kookaburra Kids, so children who have come to program, and seeing how that affects their mental health literacy and their help-seeking behaviour. What I can say is our research to date shows that kids' mental health literacy before they come on camp is significantly less than after they leave camp. So they go away from camp or programs. So I might talk a little bit about the programs and how they're kind of separated into connect, long and short activity days and camps in a minute. But our research is showing essentially that mental health literacy pre-program is not as good as post-program. So there's an effect of attending a Kookaburra Kids camp. And then that really important help-seeking behaviour, where do kids go and get help from? This came as a huge surprise to me in our digital age, where everyone's on webinars and things like that. They're more likely to approach a telephone helpline, which really came as a big surprise to me. I thought they'd all want to be on the apps and on the internet, but they're seeking assistance from telephone helplines. Maybe a big part of that is one of the activities on camp is contacting the kids helpline and speaking to a counsellor. And the people at the kids helpline are fantastic. They talk to our Kookaburra Kids. They know who they are when they're calling. And that just shows our kids that it's not actually scary or a huge thing to phone up and have a chat with someone from the kids helpline. So I think that may be what's influencing that. So our early doors literature at the moment shows that our mental health literacy in kids who come to Kookaburra Kids is improving, and help-seeking behaviours are getting better. Working in mental health, I love anecdotal stories. So I do love stories from our kids. I've seen many Kookaburra Kids. I've been around for many years in Kookaburra Kids now, not as long as Crosbi, but for many years now. And I've seen kids come in at 8 years old and exit the system as young adults. And it's really wonderful to see the effect that program has on them. So there's a few kids that I can think about. One that Crosbi briefly spoke about before, keeping chat book under his bed, and he would refer to that book to help him with life's difficulties and difficulties with coming to terms with his parents' mental illness. He really turned to that book, and he will tell you that he found it really helpful and really useful. And he's a very high functioning young man who is actually qualified in a very difficult area to get a degree in, and he's really thrived. There's another kid that I'm thinking of that comes to mind that came as an 8-year-old. I remember it was one of my first Kookaburra Kids camps, and all I did was give this young girl shoulder rides again and again and again. And I remember I've never been so tired in my entire life, but it was all she needed in that moment was an adult that she could boss around and tell what to do. She obviously had all of the Kookaburra Kids program, and not long ago she actually came on placement with me and did a placement because she was really interested in the criminal justice space. So it's really nice to see that in spite of familial mental illness and the challenges that may bring, she was actually thriving and doing really well, and seeing that full circle.
I think it also speaks to the connections that get made at Kookaburra Kids, and it's not just connections with other children, but also connections with our leaders and with our clinicians that become, important people. That even things like when we, would see young people again and again, they would say, "Oh, you cut your hair," or "Oh, this has changed," and those relationships become really important.
Yeah, and also what was fun on camp was them guessing which leaders are dating which leaders, which when you're married to each other is quite interesting who they pair you with. So that was quite funny. But that does lead in very well to the kind of Kookaburra stepped approach. So I think the first thing that we say is we are pre-early intervention. So what we know is that, and I know we're not a mental health service, so I'll be careful when I say this, but what we know is the first introduction to mental health or mental health services kind of predicts how you might engage with mental health services for the rest of your life if you need to. So Kookaburra Kids is often that pre-early intervention, that starting point, where kids get a really positive experience of mental health experiences and get it delivered to them and at the right time, in the right format. And it's not in a stuffy clinic. It's not with two people sat in these big winged back armchairs. It's on camp. It's around a campfire. It's whilst doing activities and whilst having fun. And that's their first introduction to kind of mental health talk and services. So I think that that's a really important starting point. We have a step process where the kids can drop in and out of these at any time, and they're not stepped as insofar as you get a level of acuity and you come into one, but they can come to Kookaburra Connect, which is an online Zoom room, which is facilitated by one of our leaders, and that is, it's been developed over time, but as it stands at the moment, and Renee can correct me if I'm wrong, is it's an informal chat about connection, about connecting with peers who are experiencing similar things to you, and that understanding that you're not alone. So that's Connect. It's great. What we really like about Connect is it was in our strategic plan to do in a couple of years' time, and COVID with its challenges also came with its opportunities. And because we were unable to offer face-to-face programs, we really developed our Connect sessions. So kids are able to jump on a Zoom room anywhere around the country and still engage with young people who are going through something similar to them. If we look at our defence kids, when they're posted overseas, they still come into Kookaburra Connect and they can still connect, even though their parent may have been posted overseas. So that's a beautiful thing about the Connect sessions, is it's accessible, it's available, and it can also be something to keep kids engaged, but it can also be putting a toe in the water as well. So they might not be ready for an activity day or a camp. They might be just ready to come to a Connect session and see people online. And then their faces when they actually do meet up at an activity day or a camp is really hard. I mean, they're like, oh, it's you, I know you from online and things like that. So that's really great. That's Connect. And the other opportunity is short or long activity days. I'll just mold them into one for now. So that's a fun activity, like Renee says, we've done the bridge climb, there's the zoos, there's rock climbing, there's my least favorite activity, which is archery, which I won't go into. All of these kind of fun activities where kids go and have fun with peers who are going through similar things or having similar home life experiences. And then they also get some mental health literacy and help-seeking behaviours kind of thrown in. It's a little bit like putting carrots in the spaghetti bolognese. We're kind of giving them a fun time and giving them some mental health literacy and help-seeking supports as well. So that's our short and long activity days. And then we've got our camps, and that's the area that I'm really passionate about. I really enjoy going away on these camps. So I went as a leader, then as the camp nurse, and then as a camp clinician. And it really is a great opportunity to have the kids in a place where they all come together. They're doing really, really fun activities. They're in cabin groups where they've really formed strong bonds. They have leaders who come from all walks of life. They might be police officers, accountants, mental health nurses, psychologists, all kinds of different backgrounds that our leaders have. And the kids go and do the fun activities, again, rock climbing, giant swing, all of those kind of things. And then they also get the mental health literacy. On the camps, it's well designed. Crosbi's done a fantastic job in the design of it. It's excellent. It's almost seamless. On day one, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, on day one, it's all about mental health literacy, understanding mental illness, understanding mental ill health. It might introduce you to celebrities who have a mental illness that you might not have known about, to kind of normalise mental health and an understanding of mental health literacy. And then day two is really given over to help seeking behaviours. So it's kind of like a stage. It's like, this is mental illness and mental health.
And story sharing and connecting with each other. So those are the two goals on day one, is learning about mental health and connecting with each other's stories. And then day two is kind of, what do we do from here? How do we now develop those coping skills and those services?
Absolutely, yeah. So, and just to backtrack on day one, we definitely do not make our children tell us if they don't want to. They can sit there and listen. And a lot of our kids, we find, take it in. And I've heard you say this many times. They take it in over maybe 1, 2, 3 camps. and then on a future camp they kind of open up and they've absorbed all of this information that you might have perhaps thought they weren't taking in.
And something, just to that point that you were saying, something that we have found, you know, anecdotally, and through kind of doing some smaller surveys, is that even children who choose not to actively participate actually still benefit, and report benefits from the process. So that's why we're really clear about it's got to be comfortable for everyone, and that means if you want to share, that's great. If you don't want to share, that's okay too. And we certainly, we think that people are getting benefit whether they actively open up or not.
And then the only other thing I'll say about the camps and the activity days is, particularly on the camps, there's mental health clinicians available as well. So that's to give advice to our volunteers, provide support to our children, and that continual improvement of the design of the programme. So we've got a great team of clinicians, in addition to our programme staff and all of our support staff in Kookaburra Kids, that are really making it a great programme that we're building on the evidence base. We know it's built on evidence. We're building on that evidence base, and we're delivering these programs to both for what we call our core children and our defence and first responder children, which is essentially a fine tuning of the content of Chat Group to meet the needs of those different groups. I've probably gone well over time because I do talk a lot and quite fast as well. Just all I want to touch on really is with having conversations with your own kids about perhaps your own mental health difficulties or family mental health issues. I think if we remember those four kind of pillars or tenets that Crosbi spoke about, and under pressure I'm going to forget them, but I guess I'll maybe if I can start and you can finish off for me.
Okay. Age appropriate information, knowing they're not alone and being connected to others, coping skills, services.
Great. So the first port of call, I think, is that age appropriate information. So having a conversation with your kid. People are often scared to talk about these topics, thinking they're too scary or they're too big. We find that if you can start the conversation and be honest and raw, kids are actually watching you and noting things about you that you might not be noticing that they're noticing. So to be honest and open with them in an age appropriate way, I think is really, really important. Obviously, we don't want kids to be burdened with a sense of responsibility for their parents' mental ill health. We certainly don't want that, but we do want them to have an understanding. And we also want people to know where they can get help. So obviously, from an organisational perspective, Kookaburra Kids is there to offer that assistance to your kids, and we welcome referrals. Really, really keen to take referrals. But also, people often don't know that one of the first starting points, if you're concerned about yourself or someone else, is your GP. You can go and see your GP and talk to your GP, and they will have a whole raft of services that they can refer you to and they can assist you with. The Kookaburra Kids website has got different resources that you can access. So I think the first thing, and probably the most important thing, is to have that conversation and be honest, but in an age appropriate way. Because if you're not, the kid will fill in the gaps, and the gaps might be filled in incorrectly. So that information is really, really important, and also that knowing where to get help. So encouraging help-seeking behaviours if that's what's required. And I think I'll shut up there.
No, that's absolutely fantastic. I do have a quick question for Lee before we move on to some additional questions. I know there was some research recently done via Kookaburra Kids on connection, and I just wanted you to touch on that, because when I went to a function with Kookaburra Kids, I spoke to a young girl there. She was probably about 11 or 12 years old, and I asked her, I said, what's your favourite thing been so far with Kookaburra Kids? And I was expecting her to come out with the roller skating or this activity or that. And she said, meeting a new friend, someone who gets it. And the other little 12-year-old girl was there. And that just blew me away, because I could see where that would have been really helpful for my own children. So could you just give us a couple of minutes on that connection aspect and that research paper?
Yeah, absolutely. So I will preface this with I'm probably not all over the connection research paper as much as I should be for a webinar on this. So my apologies for that. But what we do know is that that connection between our kids on program is really, really, really important, because often this is something that people keep to themselves and they kind of hold with shame, and they feel like, well, and I know I've spoken to you, Crosbi, about it. Your mum, to some of your friends, was this enigma who was like really fun and really vivacious and really great, and you were quite embarrassed about her at times because her behaviour was,
completely outside of normal.
That's right. So that they might hold it and hide it and not talk about it. So when they've got other kids there that are going through similar things, that connection is really important, because they can have honest conversations and they can have that, oh, my parent says this, oh, me too, how do you deal with that? Oh, I deal with it like that. So I'm completely aware. I'm a 46-year-old man. I'm telling kids how to deal with things. I'm not cool. I don't know about TikToks and stuff like that. But when they hear it from their peers and they get that advice, and then they can check it with respected adults on camp as well, that checking in, that connectedness is really, really important. And we really do. And I think I touched on it earlier, when they see each other on Connect and then they see each other IRL, is the cool word, in real life, they just run towards each other, so excited. And then I know you were going to say something in a second. The only other thing that I hear from a lot of our kids is sometimes they're bullied at school because they've come from a different environment, or they may have different clothes, they may, their parents' mental illness may mean that they don't have school lunches or something like that. So some of our kids have been bullied for opening up in the past in an unsafe space. Kookaburra Kids provides them that safe space to open up with peers who have been through something similar. And I think that probably speaks a lot to the connectedness piece.
I was just going to add, in terms of that connection, is that it almost creates, it's a shortcut. So they don't have to explain, oh, let's say, for instance, mum's having a bad day. What does that look like? What does that mean? It's young people who, they get that. They can just say, mum's having a bad day, and immediately someone else who understands that experience or knows what's going on for them is like, oh yeah. And they feel understood and feel heard, or even being able to share things that they probably, I know you touched on, probably wouldn't share with other people, but knowing that other person gets what all of that means, and you don't have to explain it. So, dad's gone into hospital. They get what that means without someone having to go, oh, because, these are the things that he experiences, and, blah, 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 blah. So I guess it's creating that shortcut for kids to connect with someone without having to do the whole explanation, and then, I guess, feeling different.
And the only final thing, the only final thing I want to add is we come from a position of strength as well. So we know that parents who have got children and the parents are suffering from a mental illness, in spite of that mental illness, they're doing the best job that they can, and we want to really promote that and empower the parent to continue to do the best job that they can in spite of the difficulties that they're suffering. So we certainly want to empower parents to be able to thrive as much as our children, because we really understand that in spite of what's going on for you, you're doing a great job. We're just kind of helping out around the edges so that you can have those conversations and that your kids can understand. So I just want to acknowledge the hard work that parents do, and when you're impacted by poor mental health or mental illness, we want to acknowledge how tough that job is and what a great job you're doing.
And just adding to that, similarly, as we do talk about in chat group, I guess, it's hard to describe that fine line between asking kids to take on responsibility, emotional or physical, that's not theirs, versus what can they do to help. Is we do have conversations around what is reasonable for them to do to help. So, for instance, if you recognize that today is not a great day for your parent and they're really not up to it, maybe don't be so upset if you didn't get exactly what you wanted in your lunch, or like maybe if they ask you, could you do some chores around the house, you could just do them. So we do have conversations also about what is reasonable for you to do to help as part of this family. So certainly want to recognize that everyone's doing the best they can, and we're just trying to help.
One thing I'm really getting is I love the passion that the Knight family comes across with this. Renee, you would have to be so proud of this pair. Renee, I have a question for you, and it's come up with a couple of questions in our chat box, but what is the process? If somebody is watching this today, this webinar, or at any point in time, what is the process if they feel that this might be an option for them? What's involved?
Thanks, Belinda. And I was madly typing some responses to questions in the chat. So thank you, everyone, for engaging so well. If you know of a young person who would benefit from our programs, you are able to make a referral. They can come through schools, they can come through medical professionals, they can also come through families themselves, and that they just go through our website. There's some information to fill out, and our clinical team will be in touch and do some intake information there to get some more information about the child and what the needs are. We've had some questions about accessing our programs at the moment. As I explained a little earlier, we've got a fantastic partnership with the Department of Veteran Affairs, which means that we're able to offer our programs to the children of current serving and ex-serving members of the Defence Forces across Australia. And there are a multitude of those programs being held every single week all around Australia. So if you are one of those groups, please go online and have a look at those programs that are available. For children from core families and from first responder families and non-defence families, we have a lot of the Connect sessions, the online Connect sessions that Lee mentioned earlier. We have an abundance of those available. So children are able to get onto those really quickly to be able to access that kind of first level in that stepped care situation that Lee was explaining. We do have some physical programs for those, not as many as we would like. And so I think that's the main kind of takeaway from here at the moment for where we're at, is that we want to be able to offer more programs for first responder children and for the children of core families. And we're working really hard to secure funding for that at the moment. So we're hoping to have some really good news about being able to offer more of those programs into the future. But if you do register, all children can access those Connect programs right away, and we will keep in touch and let you know as soon as we've got some more of those physical programs on offer. We will be letting families know.
Fantastic. That's wonderful. I have a question now for Crosbi. Were there any theoretical frameworks that informed the development of chat groups?
Yes, a variety. So I guess I took not necessarily a theoretical framework, but looking at the current knowledge around child development and around stages of development, and at what point kind of children, there's a few different points in that, at what point children have a concept of others as being separate to themselves versus, that we're all one thing, and at what point they start to develop that idea about needing to be, empowered, and that's where the age-appropriate information comes in around their understanding of how they can process that information. From more of a theoretical perspective, I guess there's two things that influenced it. One would be from an ACT perspective, so acceptance and commitment therapy, which really talks about, I guess, understanding the difficulties that are going on in our lives. All of the up and down emotions are part of life, and we're not going to struggle with them. So we're not going to try to necessarily change those things that are happening. What we're going to do is think about, how can I accept that this is what's happening in my life, and how can I take committed action towards the values of who I want to be, whilst those things still exist. And how can I practice that, I guess, mindfulness? So mindfulness is key in ACT therapy, in being aware of my own internal experience, also what's happening outside. Children often find it difficult to really connect into their own internal experience, both emotionally and physically. And that's part of this coping strategies that we develop, is how can I recognize when I'm feeling an increase in stress or anxiety and worry? What does that feel like in my body? And then what can I do about it so that then I can get through this situation? Another theoretical framework that I guess has come into it a little bit is ARC, which is attachment, regulation and competency. And so that's really coming from a trauma-informed perspective about what are the needs of those kids that are experiencing those difficulties, what are their needs around attachment. And I think that really speaks to the connection piece. So it's not just attachment to their parent, but attachment to others, who they see as safe, who they see as understanding them, who they feel safe to be with. So that's the connection with other campers and other participants participants in activity days and in Connect, and also to the adults that are part of the program. Regulation is around how can I regulate my own feelings around this, and also understand what's impacting other people's regulation, so why they might be going up and down. And then competency is that real piece around people feeling able to develop their own coping strategies and access services. So those have kind of been in the background, but not necessarily laid out in chat group, because it's not so relevant for the children to know.
Crosbi, while we're on the topic of framework, there has been another question here. How often do you review the mental health literacy and education to ensure it is relevant and update to aligning with evidence-based practice?
So we did a big review a few years ago, and what we tend to do is keep an eye on the material that comes out. So, you know, obviously we have access to, you know, all the different kind of professional bodies and also literature from evidence-based journals. And as new material comes out, if it's something that's relevant that we think, look, this should be included, then we would look at, are there parts we need to review? What part is it applicable to? How do we review that? Look, I'm pleased to say that actually there hasn't been anything that has come out that has required a change of our material, although I am really interested in, I guess, the emerging evidence that will come out around virtual interactions and around, you know, kind of what has happened since the pandemic, and virtual, I guess, interventions, and how that could enhance maybe the next version of chat group to really accommodate that virtual component. So there isn't anything that would require us to change, and we do it, I guess, as the new emerging evidence would indicate.
Yeah, I think just adding to that, we have a clinical and research team as well that that keeps on top of that, the emerging trends, the emerging research, and keeps it up to date. So that's a kind of a cross-team approach.
There was also a question, and I noticed Renee has actually answered it, and I'm curious now if you can add anything to it. The question was, what are some barriers you find on online sessions, distractions, mental health disorders, and emotional topics?
Do you want to answer that?
Yeah, I don't really have anything to say to that. I think Renee's better placed to answer than me without wishing to throw her under the bus.
I think there's certainly comment on what are some barriers in person, but barriers on the online ones, I think probably Renee might be best placed.
Yes, I've been sitting in a lot of these since I started, and I've actually started hosting them, which I have really enjoyed. The sessions run for about 45 minutes, and so it's quite a condensed amount of time. And in that, the young people are taken through a range of different slides with discussion points and topics to discuss with one another and engage with each other. And then there's also an online game that they do and compete with each other, and there's so much laughter. It's actually, it is a highlight of my week, running these sessions with the young people. There is a component of mental health literacy that is in there. It is quite light on because the real focus of those sessions is absolutely on that connection and having those conversations between the young people. And you know, I had the same question, how engaged are young people going to be staring at a screen in the evening? But from all of the ones that I've participated in, the engagement levels are really high and the energy is high. And yeah, it's quite an uplifting experience.
Fantastic. I have one more question. I know at the time, but I have one more question. And Renee, this is for you. I know you have answered it, but I'd really love to get the verbal answer from you. So it's definitely recorded on the website. Is how can people volunteer to help Kookaburra Kids?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Belinda. That's a wonderful question. And thank you to the person who asked that on the chat as well. We are always looking for volunteers. Kookaburra Kids could not run if it were not for our volunteers. And you've just heard from two of our volunteers who have been roped in, and obviously their engagement is even deeper with us. And I hate to warn you, but that may be a result of your volunteering. You might become so passionate about what it is that we do that you too could be sitting on these couches and speaking here. If you visit our website, we've got details of how you can sign up to volunteer in your state. All of our programs, our physical programs and our online programs have a volunteer present, and for the physical programs, a number of volunteers. We walk you through that process with all of the checks and everything that you need to go through. It's quite a smooth process to get all of those checks and balances so that we can make sure that you're suitable. But we're always looking for wonderful volunteers, and we're incredibly thankful to every volunteer that we have in our organisation. We couldn't do what we do without their help.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I might pass it. We've actually got one more question. Do we have time, Tracy? Okay, one more question. And the reason why I've decided to throw this one in is because this is a question from Rose, who is a Kookaburra kid, or was a Kookaburra kid. So I think this is an important question. So Rose says, you mentioned navigating a post-COVID world. Did you see any significant barriers accessing Connect sessions? Were there any kids who fell through the gaps?
You're right for that one, Lee.
Well, it's a very, very challenging question, Rose. Thank you for that. Look, I think my answer is it's very hard to gauge who's fallen through the cracks. That's one of the kind of, I guess, difficulties with working in any kind of mental health arena. You don't really hear who's fallen through the cracks until it's too late and you're here. I think that COVID obviously stopped our face-to-face programs, and we were unable to offer those. It was a challenging time. We knew that the need was still there, and that's really what allowed us to I really don't like this word, but I'll use it, pivot to an online world where we developed chat group in response to that need. So I think that during COVID, we probably were able to access more kids than prior, purely because of the reach that online allows. Now, whether it's as efficacious as face-to-face, I think is yet to be seen. And my kind of feeling from a clinical perspective is that it's probably not as good as face-to-face, because it doesn't have the depth that our face-to-face programs have. That's not to say that it can't be adjusted, but the short answer, Rose, is I don't know. I think that it was something that we had to do with what was happening during COVID, and certainly we're not in a post-COVID world. I've hastened to add, COVID is still around. It's still a very real issue. But now we've got most of our freedoms back. What Connect allows is that connection beyond the face-to-face program. So I think that's really important, and that will assist in closing that gap and assisting people not falling through the cracks, so that they actually they've got the ability to be regularly engaged with us, and we've got that ability to be able to intervene early and where needed.
And something I would just add on that as well is that I know that so we have lists of young people who are registered with the program in all our different jurisdictions, and we obviously also have teams who coordinate and get things going. And so if they're looking at who is participating in Connect, or often we do have young people who become very well known to us because they're regular attendees, and if all of a sudden they're not appearing in Connect in their area, or nobody's really heard from them, I know that our staff are really committed and dedicated to following up with families and following up and trying to find out is there something we can do to make this easier? What's happening? We just want to check in. And so I again can't comment in any definitive way about whether or not there were potentially people who fell through the gaps, but I do know that there are options that certainly our dedicated teams do follow up to try and make sure that we're not losing anyone.
Absolutely. And if extra help is required, our team is incredibly good at navigating complex mental health systems and enabling engagement with mental health teams as required, or other services as required. I guess one of the final things I'd just say on not necessarily falling through the cracks, but we are at this stage only able to help a small percentage of the number of kids that we actually want to reach. And I don't want to get too crude and crass and into kind of the guts of it, but in order to do that, we need funding, we need money, and our core program has no government sponsorship that I'm aware of. So it is really down to the generous donations of our corporations and individuals, and we need that to continue in order to be able to provide a service beyond what we're offering at the moment. We know we're kind of tip of the iceberg at the moment, and we'd really want to expand our offering to provide more camps to more kids, so that nobody falls through the cracks.
Oh, absolutely. So if anybody's watching and you know where some funding can be available for Kookaburra Kids, don't hesitate to get in touch. We'll have to wrap up now, and I'm going to hand back to Tracy very shortly, but I cannot thank the three of you enough for coming on board and speaking today. I think our audience can see the expertise, the passion, it's evidence-based what you offer. you're talking about those 4 pillars. That is just that is absolutely wonderful, and you've given some great advice and strategies for adults who might be suffering a mental illness, or for families, how they can talk to the young people. So thank you so much for coming on board today. For those who do still have questions, Tracy will send you contact details. Don't hesitate to send an email or phone Kookaburra Kids and ask them your question. You can see the expertise, and I'm more than happy to respond. Thank you so much. I'll hand back over to Tracy to finish off.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. We hope you enjoyed. A recording will be sent by the end of the week, and it will be live on the Fearless YouTube channel, probably by the weekend. So available to everyone to view. Okay, thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thanks so much.